Looks like the gang is still here, and we're going to be able to start all over again, mate. That's right. We got to start over. Looked like we had a problem. Doesn't look like it's working, but I say it's going to work soon. And then we're going to get into a stunning chart that screams buy gold and silver. But first, we've got to get it going now. We've got to get running now. All right then. I say it's time to play the music. That's right. Here's the music. Hello and welcome again to another Smaulgld live stream. Tonight is Wednesday, the 23rd of January 2019, and tonight's topic is stunning chart that screams buy gold and silver. If you ever needed a reason to buy gold and silver, we are going to show you a chart, an exclusive, stunning chart no one has seen before, that will give you all you need to know if you want to buy gold and silver. So stunning chart that screams buy gold and silver is coming up later in the program. But first, we're going to take a look at some of the game-changing events of the day, including the price of gold, the price of silver, the stock market, and all the news that happened. We're going to do a little Moronica, and then we're going to show you that stunning chart that just screams buy gold and silver. All right, let's take a look now at our gold and silver prices. They were pretty much flat today. I have to say, didn't go up too much, didn't go down too much, which meant gold went down a little bit today. It went down $2. It went down $2. And it closed at about $1,282, and that was down about 0.17%. And currently, it has moved up $1 to about $1,283. Let's take a look now at silver. Silver went up a little bit. Yep, silver went up a little bit. Went up about 2 cents and to $15.34, and that's where it sits at the moment. And what did that do for the gold-silver ratio, the unsustainable gold-silver ratio? That should be 16-1 or 9-1 or 1-1 or other such nonsense. Well, it went down a little bit, heading down to 1-1. Silver's just smoking by at these levels, 83.60 to 1 gold-silver ratio. Just a reminder, when you hear this nonsense about the gold-silver ratio being unsustainable, I gotta believe it's gonna go down. It's gotta go down. There's your 5-year chart. You've been believing that and hearing that for 5 years, and it's gone up. All right, we're going to dwell on that tonight. In other gold and silver news, or really gold news, we have been talking about and have covered the Barrick-Rand Gold merger, and then recently we covered extensively the Newmont Mining and Goldcorp Mining merger, which brought together the second and fourth largest mining companies. And in those discussions, we talked about why those companies were merging. They were looking to get even further economies of scale, realizing that there's not much gold left, easy pickings to pull out of the ground. So it's best to kind of combine their resources, eliminate some of the less productive mines, and focus on being even more efficient and getting bigger by merging. Well, that trend continues as it looks like two South African miners, Gold Fields and AngloGold Ashanti, wish to merge. And I think AngloGold Ashanti is the third largest gold miner. Those other two mergers that we talked about had very little exposure to South Africa. South African mines, South Africa used to be the world's largest gold producing nation. It was very, very important in the geopolitical scheme of things, because when the country, the United States and the world was on that Bretton Woods gold standard, a good portion of the free world's gold came from South Africa. Another large gold producer at the time was Russia, but Russia was part of the Soviet Union. So the world's free gold essentially came out of South Africa, and they mined like nuts. They mined tremendous amounts of gold during that time, and that gave South Africa some geopolitical significance, somewhat that along the lines of what Saudi Arabia had 10, 20, 30 years ago as being the world's dominant oil producer. But since then, South Africa really has depleted its mines, and the average all-in sustaining cost for gold mining in South Africa in some instances is over $1,500, $1,800 per ounce, sometimes over $2,000 an ounce. And that creates a problem. So I'm not sure what the thinking. I haven't looked at. There isn't really a merger announced. It looks like it says it wants to announce or wants to combine. So we'll keep that on the back burner if they do mine, and we'll take a look. They do merge those two mining companies, and we'll take a look at their statement on what they might plan to do if they're in South Africa. I would imagine some of the mines are probably not worth keeping open, or at least at the current price. And it's possible that they may wish to expand. Not quite sure, but now that we've seen all the large players in the gold mining industry looking to, the top four have already identified merger partners and either have merged or are thinking about merging. And that, to me, tells us that they realize that gold mining is an expensive business, and a lot of the easy and cheaper pickings have long since been mined, and they're looking for ways to pool costs and see if they can continue to be profitable mining gold. All right. Now, what happened in the cryptos today? Let's take a look at the crypto prices. They've been pretty much flat and stabilizing the last few days. Bitcoin right now, the last 24 hours, at $3,555 on Coinbase. That's pretty much flat. Bitcoin Cash has had a couple of good days. It's now at $130.64 on Coinbase at up 3.26%. Ethereum down a little bit to $116.55, down 1.5%. Litecoin up a little bit to $31.69, up 0.45%. And Ethereum Classic at $4.35, down 0.91%. Now we're seeing some stories that the Lightning Network appears to be growing. I mean, it's growing from a very small base, but they're saying it is growing exponentially. And the idea there is that the Lightning Network would help Bitcoin and Litecoin scale such that they would not have to rely on transactions first having to be cleared and verified on the blockchain. They would be added later. And that's the idea of the Lightning Networks. And they say it's growing, which would help. Now, another thing, Davos is happening. Davos is where all the people that are against global warming fly their private jets to somewhere in the middle of the Alps and discuss how to deal with things like wealth inequality. And PayPal was there, and the CEO of PayPal was saying, we're not seeing many retailers at all except any of the cryptocurrencies. And I'm sure Blockbuster was thinking the same when Netflix came out in its first years, that they weren't seeing many people leaving their store and having DVDs mailed to them. What else happened during the day? Well, there's big news today in Venezuela. Yes, we had pretty much unanimity in the United States that Trump and Pence came out and said they are not supporting Maduro as the Presidente de Venezuela. They are saying that they are going to recognize El Presidente Juan Guaido. He's the interim president of Venezuela. And he is the person that the United States, los Estados Unidos, and Canada are going to recognize. Now that is some say it's an act of war, But this is not one where the Democrats are piling on Trump and saying, what are you doing? This isn't right. Because we also saw that the Democrat-led House Foreign Affairs Committee with Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Chairman of the committee, Representative Eliot Engel of New York, Representative Shalala, and Rep. DMP are joining to introduce legislation to support the people of Venezuela and say they will also not recognize the legitimacy of Senor Nicolas Maduro's presidency. So there you go. Everyone's against Venezuela today, and that is bipartisan, both sides of the aisle. However, a feud still brews between Nancy Pelosi and Donald J. Trump. Nancy wanted to deny Donald Trump his ability to give the State of the Union next week. She sent a letter last week saying, you can't come here. It's a security risk. That got blown out of the water because the Secret Service and others in charge of the security detail said there is no security risk. We could take care of it. Trump wrote back today and said, hey, I'm coming over. And then Nancy wrote back, no, you're not. And so now we're at another impasse. Nancy's saying we have to not allow you to come because the government shut down. She got rid of the excuse for the security. And Trump is saying, well, you invited me when the government was shut down, and now you're uninviting me because the government is shut down. So what are we going to do? Looks like Trump will probably give his speech somewhere else, and not quite sure how this is all going to work out. But it appears that both sides are willing to go to the mattresses. No wall for the Democrats. That's their bargaining position. And Trump's position is wall. We'll see where that goes and how long this is going to go on. Also today, we had this tweet. Now remember, you guys have been following me for years. Back in 2014, I started talking about how the new petrodollar would be backed by U.S. oil based on this shale oil and other discoveries of oil in the United States, and it would effectively make the petrodollar far less important than it was at the time, and it's already had been by 2014 become less important, simply because countries were holding dollars not just so they can buy oil from Saudi Arabia, but now if you need a reason to buy oil and a reason to hold dollars, you need them not only to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, but also to buy oil from los Estados Unidos, gli Stati Uniti, come si dice in Italiano. And yes, Donald Trump is making the point, or quoting from the National Review, we are now exporting oil, which is the first time in my lifetime. We're now the largest producer of oil and gas. That's not good if you're Vladimir Putin and you have pictures of naked Trump, where your chief export is oil. Not good for the Kremlin. Tucker Carlson, I don't know how he came into that. Yes, so the idea that the petrodollar is destined to go under, it really doesn't matter. And by the way, the petrodollar has been even more secured if you think that it relies on Saudi oil, because over the last year, the United States has moved and tightened its relations with Saudi Arabia even more by eliminating the Iran deal and totally ignoring the Khashoggi murder that happened under the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey. So if countries need a reason to hold dollars, which I don't believe, they don't hold dollars simply just to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. They hold them as reserves and for other trade, but they will have to continue to hold them to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. And now that the United States is the world's largest oil producer and natural gas producer, and they're also going to be selling coal to foreign countries and natural gas to Germany, natural gas to China, many other countries buying energy resources from the United States. Those countries will continue to need dollars. So the end of the petrodollar story, well-worn cliche, and far less important as a geopolitical element. All right, that does it for the news. Well, there was some news on China today. These are just, there's three examples of why there's, I don't know how anybody can cheer on China. Here's one, the Brooking Institute. Now, the Brooking Institute is one of these globalist type think tanks, perhaps the world's top think tank, says General Retired Rob Smaulgld. However, it's under scrutiny for receiving six-figure donations from Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei. Nice. Here's another one. Now, remember yesterday we talked about a new practice in China, in a particular region, where if you jaywalk, your face will then be shown on screen and all your personal details around the on the sidewalk or up in a billboard above the sidewalk, so everybody can see that you are a nasty person, that you jaywalk. Well, now there's a new app in China. It's called the Debt Shaming app, and it warns users if they are near somebody who is perhaps not a good credit risk. And but never mind, they've got the gold-backed yuan game changer. And I guess you can carry this new app on the Belton Road and make sure you're not standing next to anybody who happens to be a bad credit rating. Here's one. Now, we've been saying for years that China actually is a Ponzi scheme, and that China just runs up the GDP by building stuff they don't need. This one is even better than companies in America that buy back their stocks. They do that all over the world. But this is unique. Companies buying back their own bonds. Now, that's a very clever trick. So you issue bonds and you have to pay the bonds back. So you buy the bonds, and I guess you don't have to pay them back if you buy them, but they're now extended, and I guess you get the money for issuing the bonds, but you never have to pay them back because you own them, or you can pretend to pay them back. And if you pay them back, you pay them back to yourself with the proceeds that you receive from issuing the bond. Only in China. Gold back yuan. That's quite a game changer if you ask me. It's a reason to think that the dollar's days are numbered. All right, well, I think it's now time for Veronica.
Uh-oh. We got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent.
Hey, this has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
Okay, well, this one, I don't know if it's moronic or it's sad or... If any of you know the Milton Friedman, he gave a very nice explanation of how people spend money and the value they get from it. And he broke it down into like a box, if you can visualize it. The first is when you spend money on yourself, your own money on yourself. And then the second is if you spend someone else's money on yourself. And then the third is if you spend someone else's money on yourself, and then if you spend someone else's money on someone else. Now, we're just going to focus on the first and the fourth. When you spend money on yourself, your own money, you make sure that you get the best value. But when you spend someone else's money on someone else, you can see the big difference in what you're willing to do. It really doesn't matter. It's not your money, and you don't have to worry about the quality of the service that you're going to get. And essentially, spending someone else's money on someone else is what government is. Anytime you give money to a government agency, they're effectively spending somebody else's money, and not on themselves, but on someone else. That's what your schools are, I'd imagine. But that we understand. That's part and parcel of having a government, and there's no way you can get around that other than trying to hire people who may want to be, or at least think of themselves as stewards or fiduciaries of someone else's money when they spend it on someone else, meaning when they spend it to build the roads, administer the schools, and so on. But this story here, now remember, that's what you have to do when you have a government for the people, by the people, and so on. That's your own government. But once you start sending money overseas, like for foreign aid, really, you don't even have the ability to realize or to be a fiduciary on how that money is spent. So you spend somebody else's money, and then you ship it out to Nicaragua, or you ship it out to China, whatever foreign aid you ship it out to. Well, that's a black pit. I mean, you have no idea, black hole. What that money is going to be spent on, it's very hard to tell, and that money is just gone. But the latest one here is historic news out of New York, where the relentless work of organizers has resulted in New York Senate passing a bill, which Andrew Cuomo was going to sign, that for the first time offers undocumented students access to state financial aid and scholarship for higher education. Now, if you know, most states and the federal government do not have excess money. They are spending someone else's money on somebody else, and they're borrowing money to do it because they don't even get from taxes enough money from someone else. So they indebt the state or the federal government in order to spend money on other people. Well, New York has decided, their own DREAM Act, that they're going to allow illegal or undocumented immigrants the right to have financial aid and scholarships to go to college. Now, we know that sounds pretty moronic to me because it's not that the state has a massive surplus. It's not that everyone who wants to go to college can go to college who is a citizen. And meanwhile, they've opened it up, their poor finances, to people who technically are not supposed to be in the United States, and yet they're going to receive the same benefits as if they are citizens. Similarly, I think New York City passed a law saying that undocumented or illegal immigrants would also have access to free health care. We saw that in California. I understand the idea that socialists say that you spend somebody else's money, but ultimately the criticism of that is eventually you run out of other people's money. Well, here's a case where they've already run out of other people's money, and they are spending it not on other people, citizens. They are spending it on people who shouldn't even be in the United States. Okay. Now, let us move on to the stunning chart. You are going to see a chart that, if you ever needed a reason to buy gold or silver, this chart is going to show you all you need to know. Once you've seen this chart, you won't have to look at other channels. You won't have to hear anything. All you got to do is pull up this chart. You can make copies of it. You can save it. This is all you need to know. We're going to go through this chart. Whenever you're in doubt and you think, should I buy gold or silver? Just remember this chart. This stunning chart screams buy gold and silver. It is a 10-year chart it's an 8-year chart from 2011 to 2009, and it will show you, and it's proof that this is why you need to buy gold and silver. Here it is. This stunning chart screams buy gold and silver. Now, if you look at the left, you see the level of BS, and then we have a timeline from 2011 to 2019. The gray line represents buy silver, and the gold line represents buy gold. And so you see let's look at the first far left. JP Morgan buying silver eagles and silver maples. You see that goes from 2011 to 2016. That's still ongoing. So if you need any reason to buy gold and silver, that's one of them. But for the last, since 2011 to 2019, we have heard many times that there's a COMEX default that is imminent. Yes, the COMEX is going to default, and it's going to be game over. Yes, also, we've heard about the end of the petrodollar and the dollar collapse, and therefore you must have your gold and silver for when that happens. We've been hearing about that actually way before 2011. We heard in 2006 from Ron Paul, end of dollar hegemony. Yes, the dollar was ready to collapse. And then, of course, there's the whole concept that QE4 is coming. Negative interest rates are coming. So if you don't have your gold and silver and you haven't picked them up, any of it between the last 8 years, well, here's your chance. Of course, the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable. So if you haven't bought in the last 10 years, 8 years, on that basis, that rationale still exists. Remember, the people who promote these ideas, they're not wrong. They're just early. And of course, there's the silver shortage. Yes, silver is going to become extinct. And you will not be able to find silver anywhere. Because silver is rarer than gold. Yes, indeed. Then, of course, there's the ABX was coming. I don't remember what that was. Of course, there's sovereign-sized gold buys were coming in 2017. And who could forget the ultimate reason to buy gold was the gold-backed yuan. It was a game changer for gold, said Mike Maloney. Yes, all you had to do was, and it was going to crush the petrodollar and usher in the petro-yuan. What was going to happen was China was going to force Saudi Arabia to buy, to accept yuan when it bought oil from Saudi Arabia. And then it was going to, as an enticement, allow Saudi Arabia to exchange their yuan for gold, making it a gold-backed yuan. And that would happen on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Never happened, not gonna happen. And the petro-yuan, well, didn't happen. But all these things that you see in the chart, they could happen. So this screams buy gold and silver because you can't prove. You can't prove that there won't be a gold-backed yuan. You can't prove that COMEX will not default. You can't prove that the dollar will not collapse. You can't prove that JP Morgan doesn't have 800 million ounces of gold. You must be a shill. Whew. Okay, and remember the commercials went long gold. They went long silver I think it was last fall, and that was a stunning change, a historic change, never happened before. So, you can see here the stunning chart that screams buy gold and silver, and it's been screaming for the last 8 years. So if this chart doesn't convince you that gold and silver are set to skyrocket, well, then there's no help for you. You're not woke. You haven't watched enough YouTube videos. You don't understand that there's a new paradigm coming and that the greatest wealth transfer in history is about to happen. And one day, you too will be able to buy a single family home with just a monster box or two of American Silver Eagles. I hope you found this useful. I put a lot of time and effort into making this chart. This chart is something that everyone should have. I was thinking about charging for it, but I thought that for the benefit of humanity that I would show people what they need to know so they can protect themselves. So I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight. And please, if you have reason ever to buy gold or silver, or you're not sure, just pull out this stunning chart because it screams buy gold and silver because they are set to skyrocket. Good night.